Hi, today I'm here with University of Chicago psychology professor Katherine Kinzler, author of the brand new book out July 21st, How You Say It, Why You Talk the Way You Do, and What It Says About You. Your research shows that speech causes some of our deepest social divides. Can you give us a little explanation?
Absolutely. So when you look out into the world, it's probably no surprise to anyone that we seem to divide ourselves into groups, right? And so there's so many signs of prejudice and discrimination based on race, based on gender, based on, nationality, religion, and so forth. But one factor that people often don't think about when they think about both their own identity and how they evaluate others is their language and the way they speak. Yet this is such a critical component of people's social lives, and it's something that we use all the time to evaluate each other, and we're not always aware of it.
So how are we doing that evaluation? What are the criteria? Is it pitch? Is it accent?
Sure. So, as anybody who has tried to take a foreign language class in high school or college knows, it's incredibly difficult, right? So it's really, really hard to learn a non-native language into adulthood. Now, this means that when you speak, often what you're revealing to the world is the voices who were talking to you when you were a child. And so, via your language and often the accent that you use in your language, you hear a lot of your upbringing in that. And so I think in that sense, on the one hand, it's a really good signal, and to kind of people see it as, who are you? Where are you from? But then on the other hand, it's something that can be taken to these extremely prejudiced applications, because you'll judge somebody based on their speech and assume that they're just like this whole group of people. And you might have sort of these preconceived cultural notions about that group of people that you then apply to an individual based on their speech.
So is there a way, I get such joy. I grew up on the East Coast. When I hear a New York accent, I get such joy from that. And I can't wait till they tell me they grew up in New York so we can have some kind of bond over that. Is there a way to take the good and suppress kind of the negative of this?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's not all bad, right? So language is deeply social, it's deeply critical to our identities, and it's so important for who we connect with. So your example is really great. You meet somebody, or imagine you're traveling in a foreign country and then you run into somebody who speaks just like you do. It's kind of this, oh, someone from home. There's something really comforting about that. So there's nothing wrong with that. I think the part that we need work on is the idea that you can, you identify someone as, oh, like me, but then imagine somebody else speaking in a different way and your brain's going, oh, not like me, right? So it's both. And I think being aware of that when you meet somebody and when you evaluate them and you hear you're not like me part, kind of going off, it's something to be aware of.
That's so interesting. Are we born pre-wired to do that kind of grouping?
So yes and no. It's an academic answer, but I think I can make the case. So a lot of my research is with babies and young children. I'm a developmental and social psychologist, but I study kids a lot. And so part of it is absolutely something that seems to come online really early in life. And the part that we seem to have, maybe two parts. One is kind of this preference for things that are familiar, which makes a lot of sense, right? And so things that feel familiar and comforting, young kids like that. And so you get these sort of preferences for native or familiar sounding speech. And then the other thing is the cognitive capacity to divide the world into groups. That seems to come online really early as well. And so babies seem to have the ability to see categories of anything, but including categories of people. So if you see two people who they think are like each other in some sort of a meaningful way, then they'll think that they might, speak the same language, or they might share the same kind of preferences, if those preferences are something that seem kind of important. So right away, you've got this ability to kind of like familiar and divide people into groups. Now from there, society can layer a lot of prejudice onto those different kinds of groups. And so that's where it starts to get complicated, which is to say that those groups that become deeply stigmatized or marginalized in society, kids are like cultural sponges and they pick up on that. And so, when a kid is living in a world where there's prejudice and discrimination against some groups of people, kids are going to see that.
It's so interesting because I'm thinking about teenagers. Our audience is parents of teenagers. I'm thinking about teenagers and how much mocking goes on about someone saying something differently or
Yeah.
having an accent,
Mhm.
all done under the, guise of fun and just joking.
Mm.
So how much does that hurt, and how do we go about trying to change that?
Yeah. So one thing, I think I've noticed something similar, not with teenagers, but with parents of kids who come into my lab, which is to say that when kids express a preference for somebody who speaks, say, in a familiar accent over a less familiar accent, parents, some of them are concerned or don't like it, but other parents are kind of, oh, okay, well, my kid's like pretty good at learning languages, right? And so I think it's not out there in public discourse and awareness, the idea that you could be expressing prejudice against somebody based on how they speak, and that could feel really bad to that person, and that you might not even realize that you're doing it. And so I can imagine that happening in high schools for sure, or among adolescents, insofar as adolescents are picking up on what culture deems as, okay to say or not okay to say. Yet other research shows that when people speak in a way that's considered non-standard or different in some way, often they can feel very much like other people don't trust them, don't believe them, aren't engaging with them. And so, if you're shutting down someone's speech, the person speaking can feel that often.
So that's a conversation to have with teenagers. That would be a really
Yeah.
interesting conversation for high school
Hmm.
teachers to take on, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, you can imagine for sure, I think people are so interested in, thinking about ways to bring teenagers on board with trying to lessen prejudice and discrimination, both in their local lives, but then also in the world. And I think this is one area that people might not be thinking of, and it could absolutely be a place where teenagers could be involved.
And also you say that the accent can impact the economic opportunity or discrimination they encounter in life.
Yeah.
So that's really something significant. Not that the other stuff hasn't been, but how do we fight that?
Yeah. So one thing, so I'll talk about the economic part. So if you're thinking about people getting jobs and people being seen as like a trustworthy, knowledgeable person. So a lot of that is dependent on our assessment of, are they good communicators? Do they have good stuff to say? Are they good at saying it, right? Are they somebody I'm going to really value having here in my job, whatever it is that I'm, hiring somebody for. And the problem is that we're often not aware of biases in our own communication. And so a lot of times people think that they can't understand someone, but actually it's the listener shutting down. And so, one thing I think is helpful is just to have that be part of the public discourse, that the notion of like, who's a good communicator or who do I understand or not, that's not an absolute. Like nobody's, absolutely saying this thing that's crystal clear and everybody understands them. A lot of communication and discourse is a dialogue, and a lot of it is about what the listener is bringing to the table too.
This whole conversation makes me think about parents of teenagers who are getting older. We're 45 plus. I'm not, I'm older than that. But taking on a foreign language right now would be really, really challenging. So also hearing all the things that you're learning in your research, how hard is it for parents of teenagers to be the ones to make the change?
So I think that, I often talk about this monolingual myth that sort of permeated American culture for a long time and in different spaces. And so this is the idea that if you learn another language, like what if it's just easier to just speak English, say, right? Because if you learned another language, what if it took up some space and would like crowd out the other stuff you're trying to learn? This kind of nervousness. Now, that's not how the brain works. And actually kids are able to learn multiple languages really quite seamlessly when they're given input in both. So it does get harder as you get older. At the same time, you're probably not going to be able to learn a new language to a native like proficiency. At the same time, you could absolutely learn a new language for the benefit of being able to communicate with people and to, expand your possibilities for social engagement. And so I think parents can be a leader in terms of saying that they value exposure to linguistic diversity, to people who who speak in different ways, and to helping teenagers see that there's no right or wrong way of speaking. There's not one dialect of English that's the better way of communicating, that lots of different ways can work in lots of different social contexts. And so I think parents can be a leader in kind of setting that positive attitude for their kids, and then also encouraging these adolescents who still would probably gain a lot more from a foreign language than their parents might in terms of actual resulting proficiency, that the adolescence now is a really good time to do it before you're an adult.
So expose our kids to more languages.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a little bit of a shift from your most recent research, but the idea that when we talk about things like trying to convince our daughters that they can excel in STEM, for example, and we know that after, like around middle school, they start to perform less than the boys in their class. And so when we want to go and say, no, girls can be good at STEM also,
Right.
what's your response to that?
So, I mean, it sounds comforting, but it actually is not quite the right thing to say, probably for two reasons. It's kind of setting this, it's like, wait, why are you saying that? I think implicit in your assumption is this idea that probably people think boys are better, right? So you kind of hear that. And then the second concern is talking about girls as being just a big category of all the girls, right? It's better to talk about people as individuals, that the more that our language talks about these categories of people, it kind of reinforces the categories. And then from there, it's really easy to apply society stereotypes onto the category. So what is better to do is to think about individuals, different people, and different people are going to have different strengths and weaknesses. And they're absolutely not going to all match up with various stereotypes that you'd hear about whole groups of people. So you want to talk about individuals. And then you also want to talk about the idea that this might change. So maybe you know someone right now who's like really working hard and amazing at this, one skill set or this one pursuit or hobby, but didn't used to do it. And now they do. And maybe their interests have shifted. And so I think the idea that we can grow and learn in a field, and that lots of different individuals have lots of different talents or distribution of things they're interested in, I think that helps.
Okay, here's my last question for you. My kids are a little older, and they correct me a lot on language that I am using that has been part of my language since I was a kid. Like, for example, changing pronouns right now, which I'm completely happy to participate in, but it's really hard for me to make that shift. So what is it about the dynamic between kids and parents that sets this up?
Yeah, so I like the way you asked that question, because I think you're kind of already ahead of the curve in many ways, which is that, for as long as we've been able to record language, adults who are older often don't like the speech of younger people. And so the reason for that is because young people, and often particularly young girls, so adolescent girls, are often kind of moving and changing the language. And so for forever, adults say, oh, like, listen to these kids' language, right? This isn't as good. And so I like the way you framed that question, in the idea of you're actually trying to adapt to the kids' language, which presumably is the way that the language is going, that they actually probably have a better, grasp of where English is going to go, or the particular, kind of English that they're speaking is going to go in the future, because they're right at the center of where it's changing.
Katherine Kinzler, thank you so much for being here with us today. Fascinating information. And I encourage everybody to check out her book, How You Say It, Why You Talk the Way You Do, and What It Says About You.